Hi guys! So I finished the last book in my reading marathon, and that is the Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Reese Brennan, and Maureen Johnson. I'm going to preface this video by saying I've read this before. I've read this a lot of times before. But this was a fascinating reread because now I have context. Like, now I understand the Midnight Air so much better, and sorry, I haven't memorized all the names of these stories yet. One second. And, Vampire Scones and Edmund Herondale. The Last Stand at the New York Institute. I kind of understand that a little bit better. And yeah. So, this was a fascinating reread, but I will say this. My favourite of the short stories has not changed. It will forever and always be What Really Happened in Peru. That will always be my favourite of all the stories. But I love just about each and every one of these stories. One of them I just find monumentally sad, and therefore I can't really love it. Okay, so I do recommend reading this for those of you who haven't read it and are like, oh, but it's a novella, it's not really going to do anything. Read it, you will get background information, it will help prepare you for Chain of Gold, and who doesn't want more Magnus in their life? Magnus is best, okay? He's the best character. Read it. Honestly, I wish we had like 20 more stories of his. Anyway, so let's get into it. Okay, so it's the perfect catharsis for me after reading the Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy because I am still grieving. It's What Really Happened in Peru will always be my favorite, like I said. So in What Really Happened in Peru, it's a bunch of short stories put together of Magnus's adventures in Peru, and in just about all of them he takes them with Ragnar, as in Ragnar fell, and seeing their friendship, it's just so lovely, and seeing Ragnar is always a good time. And then in one of the stories, you have Magnus and Ragnar and Katrina being BFF goals and just being awesome. There's so many funny lines. So you said you wanted to start a new, so at one point in the story, Magnus is getting over the fact that he's been dumped, and so he goes on a massive bender, and poor Ragnar and Katrina have to try and corral him. And so it's like, you said you wanted to start a new life as a cactus. Or a bit later on, Magnus, you were trying to flirt with your own plate. I'm a very open-minded sort of fellow. Ragnar is not. And when he found out that the local delicacy you're serving us was guinea pig, he broke the plate over your own head. Like, well, never would have worked out between me and the plate. Yeah, I've listened to that a lot. I have the audiobook version of this book as well, and I've listened to that chapter a lot. And then later on he's trying to cure his hangover, because his hangover seems to have been, turned into, like, an actual illness, because he's sick, like, 37 times. And so he's being treated by one of the locals, because, yeah, Ragnar and Katrina want to punish him because he went and got so badly drunk. So they're like, this is your suffrage. And so the lady uses a guinea pig to do it. And it's like, Katrina goes at one point, let the magic of the guinea pig flow through you. Anyway, after all his adventures, he gets banned from Peru by the High Council of Warlocks. And he's not quite sure why, because they never tell him. Okay, and then in the next story, Magnus is at Paris during the Revolution, and he has a pet monkey called Ragnar. Yeah, and he like enjoys the decadence of Paris at its height, but he understands like, it's not the safest place at the moment. And then this guy called Count Axel von Vermont turns up and pleads for Magnus to save the king and queen. So Mary Antoinette, and he does save them, and in particular Mary Antoinette in a rather spectacular manner involving a hot air balloon. I can't explain it properly. You've got to read that, but it involves a hot air balloon. And Axel actually kisses him, which I did not realize happened. I don't know how I missed that, but I did. It's funny. And the vamps of Paris are offended because of, during the ensuing debacle of getting Marie Antoinette away, he kind of broke into their house and freed her. And yeah, they got offended, so he has to flee. In the next one, this is the Something Scones and Edmund Herondale, and Magnus meets Camille, Ralph Scott, and Edmund Herondale for the first time. Edmund Herondale is Will Herondale's father, and he also meets Will's mother, and how they first meet, and that whole sad, sorry tale. And we see the first attempt to have the Accords work. Shadowhunters are bigots, so it doesn't work at all. And we get a teeny tiny glimpse of a very young Charlotte. And then Edmund we don't actually see it, but we hear it. Edmund being stripped of his marks for daring to fall in love with a mundane. The Shadowhunters are merciless, like that Fairchild, Charlotte's father, essentially raised Edmund Herondale after his parents died, and he still just strips him of his marks, just like that. And you're like, you kidding me? How could you do that? And Magnus does try to help Edmund, but they stop him because they're like, look, if you try, we're going to kill you. Yeah. And then in the next one is the Midnight Air. I also have this little version of the Midnight Air. Yeah, I have a little pocket version. And so there's so much context for the Midnight Air now. Like, I know who Will, Tessa, and Brother Zachariah, and I have met Jamie because I've just read the Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy. And I'm just like, what happened to Jamie? You were so lovely. When we met you in Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy, you were so lovely. Like, you would guess you developed the power to shadow travel. But you had Matthew was going to be your parabatai, and you were happy, and I just like, what happened to you? Why are you shooting chandeliers? And where is Matthew? Why isn't he stopping you? He's your parabatai. So I'm annoyed. Will, Jem, and Tessa are still a trio, despite Jem being Brother Zachariah, and there's just a really, really lovely moment where like they're all joined hands and they're just communicating silently, and it's just so wholesome. And we find and basically, like, in this one, in Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy, you find that Will is using any excuse to get Brother Zachariah around. Any excuse. Stub a toe, call Brother Zachariah. He can fix it. Magnus is as fabulous as always in this story. And then, so he is in London because Tatiana Blackthorne, who you may remember is Gideon and Gabriel Lightwood's sister. Her husband was eaten by her father because he had demon pox and turned into a demon. And she is beyond crazy in this book. In this book, she has lost it. She is completely insane. Her son is dead, apparently, Jesse. They couldn't figure out a cure, I don't know. And now she's practicing black magic, and she's living in her old house, and it's very creepy. And she wants Magnus to kill like 5 shadow hunters, and that would give her energy for some sort of dark spell, and Magnus naturally refuses to do it. And he's just like, what are you even trying to do? And she won't tell him. And on the walls it says, God has no mercy and neither shall I. And I'm like, okay. And at one point he calls her a shadow hunter and she's like, I am not a shadow hunter. And I'm like, girl, what? It's like, my father would never let me be one. I was raised simply to marry, and now I've lost everything. And I'm like, you haven't lost everything. You still have your brothers. You just never turn to them for help, would you? And then she has an adopted daughter, Grace, who is weird and maybe evil. She's like magically alluring. And she tried to work it on Magnus and it didn't work. But apparently, we think, because when Will was unconscious, not Will, Jamie was unconscious at one point in this story, he said Grace. And so Magnus has worked out that Grace has something to do with the way Jamie's behaving, and so she must have allured Jamie. And I'm like, you stay away from that sweet boy. You stay away from him. I will carve out your heart. And she says she's a blade. I am my mother's blade. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound good. Leave Jamie alone. Clearly this has to do with Chain of Gold, so I will get my answers then. And I apologize for the weird lighting. The sun is coming through at an angle. Okay. In the next story, Magnus ran a speakeasy called Mr. Dry's, and this is in New York, and he had a regular called Alfie, and this is during the Great Depression. So, the speakeasy gets attacked by the police, and so Magnus is living in a hotel, and this guy called Atlas Nix speaks to him. He's a 2,000-year-old warlock and the current high warlock of Brooklyn, and he's got a bunch of people just at his apartment, just drinking regularly and that sort of thing. And then the Great Depression happens, the crash, the stock market crash, and people throwing them outside windows. And Alfie begs Magnus to erase his memories because he can't live while he remembers this girl and everything he's lost. So Magnus does it. And before this, Atlas Nix had warned Magnus that something was coming, something was going to happen, and that to find him at the Hotel de Mort if he wanted to talk to him. And then so he sees a red light, and it's on top of the Hotel de Mort, and he'd warned the Shadow Hunters about this. So when he turns up at the Hotel de Mort, Shadow Hunters are there, and we find out that Atlas Nix has gone completely insane, and Magnus comments to himself that this happens with warlocks sometimes when you are looking at the gaping thing of eternity and just being alive even 1,000 years from now with who knows what and with what around can be very daunting, and some people snap eventually. And so clearly Atlas Nix did, and he opened a rift to the void, which is where all the demons are, saying we need to go home. And then so Magnus works with the Shadowhunters kind of to close the rift. Atlas Nix dies in the process. And that is how the fall of the Hotel de Mort happens. Because he got these rich mundanes to fund him to do this, and he imbued like weird magic into the hotel itself. And it would never function normally again as a result. And yeah, all those mundanes are dead too. Okay, and then we meet Rafael Santiago for the first time, and this is the story of how he became a vampire and how Magnus took him under his wing. And I'm like, honestly, where was this Raphael in the Mortal Instruments series? Where were you? Because this Raphael is still rude, but he's intelligent, logical, and kind. He's a lovely boy. And I'm like, where were you? Okay, we could have used this Raphael, not the cryptic one that was constantly annoying people and drugging Simon. Ugh. And he cares for his fam and gets along well with Ragnar, and we saw a glimpse of that in the Tales from Shadowhunter Academy because they write letters to each other. Camille is useless. There is this vampire from somewhere that she had stay, and she let him do what he wanted, and what he wanted to do was murder children. Raphael, that's how Raphael got turned, and Raphael actually killed him, which was fun. And Lily was there for a brief second. Always good to see her, babe. Okay, the next one is called The Fall of the Hotel de Mort, and Magnus arrives back in New York, and there's something weird going on with the vamps. They're acting very strangely. And he works out that vampires plus blood infused with drugs is not a good combination, because drugs themselves wouldn't have an effect on vampires, but if you put it in blood, it does, and it's not a good one. And it happens around the time of Son of Sam, so the Shadowhunters don't notice all the deaths that the vampires are causing, because Son of Sam is causing trouble. And Camille is once again useless. She's actually one of the drug addicts. And Magnus and Raphael have to clean up the mess. So Raphael left because Camille's going to force him to take it, and he's like, nope, I'm out. But he came back towards the end, and he started cleaning up the mess, and Magnus put all of the vampires into forced rehab. He locked them inside the Hotel de Mort for 3 days to get it out of their system. And then the next one is it's called What to Buy the Shadowhunter Who Has Everything, Who You're Not Really Dating Anyway. And it is so sweet. It's very early on in Magnus and Alex's relationship, and it was wonderful to hear Magnus's thoughts about their fledgling relationship, like how much he truly likes Alec. Like, he really likes Alec. And we heard about a date he had at Taki's, which was so cute, and it's how Raphael knows about it, because the vamps turned up, and then 2 of the patrons in Taki's got into a fight, and Alec, leaps in front of Magnus. And so the fight stops because Alec shows it once that he can kill every one of them there without breaking a sweat. So they stop being stupid and stop getting to a fight. But Magnus is so touched because no one's ever tried to protect him before, because he's the High Warlock of Brooklyn. He's powerful himself. He doesn't need protection. But Alec does it instinctively. And he immediately pulls Alec away after they finished eating to make out with him. Oh, it's fun. And the demon he summoned was actually kind of funny. He was still a demon, but he was kind of funny. He was completely out of date. It's like, you should give them a mixtape. That's what's cool with the kids right now. And it's like, when was the last time you were summoned? The 70s? He's like, maybe. And he's like, wait, you've summoned me before. Don't you remember me? And he's like, I summon a lot of demons. That was fun. And it's so sweet at the end of that chapter because, he's trying to figure out what on earth to get Alec, and then Izzy stops by, and so he just adds extra protection onto a whip, because what would Alec want more than his family being safe? And then Alec stops by, and he's like, happy birthday, thanks for remembering, and they kiss, and it's just too cute. Okay, and then the next one broke my heart. It was Stupid Valentine and the Circle, and they killed a werewolf family, and including the children, and the Whitelaws who ran the New York Institute tried to stop them, and they killed all of them as well. And you're just like, look how far you've gone, man. And Stefan, I really don't know, Stefan, your ancestors would be so disappointed in you. Will would be ashamed of you. And Luke has his spell broken. This is when his spell gets broken, and I think it's after this that Valentine gets him tricked into being a werewolf. Because Luke questions his decision because he sees that he killed a little girl, and he's like, no, Valentine, we don't kill children. What are you doing? We don't kill children. yeah, so that was just heartbreaking. I did not enjoy that chapter. The next one is Alec and Magnus and Tessa help Jocelyn. We see that and how the Frey name came. And then the next chapter is Alec's first date. It's chaotic, but still somehow perfect. Alec is so sweet, and during this entire day, it doesn't go completely as planned. It's where borrow one of Magnus's shirts because he spilled something on himself. Then they go in. They take the tube. And he's not wearing a glamour, and then some kid tries to steal his wallet, so he judo flips him. He's like, "Dude, I didn't know you were a ninja." And this other lady's like, "You could be an actor with cheekbones like those." And Alex just "Stop talking to me. I have no idea what you're talking about." And it's honestly just. And then they get to the restaurant, and it's Downwalder restaurant, and they're freaking out because there's a shadow hunter there. And it's all very awkward, and he'd arranged a phone call, Magnus, with Kat to call him to get him out if there was an emergency, and then there's actually an emergency, and Alec goes along with, and she's like, "Take Alec with you," and they have to go and help this werewolf girl, because she was trying to have a normal life, and turns out she's there with her girlfriend, and Alec is very reassuring to her, and the girl's like, "You're not gonna kill me, are you? I mean, I deserve it after I hurt people." And Alec's like, "No, I'm not gonna kill you. You made a mistake. It's okay. You just need help." And he's just so sweet. I'm not doing that scene justice. And that's when Magnus is like, "I'm glad I did not give up on this date just yet, Alexander Lightwood." And they go back and make out in the loft, and it's like, whew. And then the final one, honestly, I was expecting it to be sad because I don't remember reading that chapter that much, but it was actually really funny. This is just all the voicemails people had left on Magnus's phone until he destroyed it because he'd broken up with Alex, so it's just after the City of Lost Souls. And it's honestly, majority of those voicemails were hilarious. Isabel calls the most, and he's like, probably tied with Alec. He's like, "This is church calling," or, okay, I've got to read you one of these. And also, Maurice calls. She calls, and she's like, "It's this is official business. I'm calling on official business, but if anyone else happens to be there, well, we discuss this official business, and you can talk to them too." Oh my goodness. Maurice freaking called. And Maya calls, and Simon calls, and Clary calls, and I have to appreciate Clary's the only one that asked, "Is Magnus doing okay?" Apart from, obviously, Alec. Okay, so this is the one, "Mr. Bane, I am authorized to contact you on behalf of my client. It is my opinion, and I consider it be the opinion of the judge, that your actions vis-a-vis terminating a relationship with one Alexander Gideon Lightwood, Esquire, were unlawful. I have in my office witnesses and documentation to prove that you were in fact common law married, and Mr. Lightwood could claim half of your freehold in Brooklyn." Alright, fine, it's Isabel again. "Alright, my lawyer is Church, but I truly believe we have a case, and Church has never lost a lawsuit. Answer the phone, Magnus." And then earlier on, he's like, she calls, it's like, "I know you told me not to call you, but it's not me calling. It's Church calling. He's in love with Chairman Meow. And you don't want to see Church when he's angry." Of all the things. Anyway, this book is fabulous. I recommend reading it. You can skip the bit with the circle if you want, because that just breaks your heart. But this book is really, really fabulous, and I really love it. And the lighting has gone completely out the window now. Shiny. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed these series of videos, and there will be another series like this around Christmas time, because I'm going to ask my family to order me the books that I'm missing, and then I'll have like 7 books to read at once, so I'll be able to do another glorious marathon again, and I'm so excited and looking forward to it. So you will be seeing those at around Christmas time, and I'm so excited to read them, but I can wait because I want to read them all at once, because it will be fabulous. And it'll be at Christmas, so I will be having time off from class, and I can do it. So, yay! The sun just hid behind a cloud. Okay, so let me just, if you liked these videos that I've done, please let me know. I really hope you did. Which one is your favourite out of all of the books that I've read over the last couple of days? And yeah, if you like, my last video will be down here. And if you like this video, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye guys!